Each year in the United States, approximately 48 million people experience illnesses caused by consuming poor-quality food, with over 3,000 cases tragically resulting in fatalities, a significant portion of whom are elderly individuals. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, emphasizes that older adults are particularly vulnerable due to their weakened immune systems. Surprisingly, many of these illnesses originate right in the refrigerator. This appliance, intended to keep food fresh, can subtly transform ordinary ingredients into sources of danger. Recent studies indicate that improper storage of certain foods in the refrigerator can significantly increase the risk of food poisoning, lead to the loss of valuable nutrients, and even trigger undesirable chemical reactions. Most alarmingly, the majority of people are unaware of this threat. Carelessly placing specific fruits, vegetables, or groceries in the refrigerator can inadvertently put you at risk. The first product on the list is particularly hazardous. When refrigerated, it not only loses its beneficial properties, but also begins to release harmful substances. Therefore, it's important to read to the end to find out which foods require special attention, as the information obtained could be vital for maintaining your health. Let's start with one of the most common products in the kitchen, which many habitually put straight into the refrigerator: potatoes. Paradoxically, storing potatoes in the cold can be dangerous. When raw potatoes are exposed to low temperatures, undesirable changes occur within their cells. The starch contained in potatoes begins to rapidly transform into sugar. At first glance, this may seem like a minor issue, but this is where the danger lies. During subsequent heat treatment of such chilled potatoes, especially at high temperatures, these sugars can react with amino acids, forming acrylamide, a chemical compound that, according to animal studies, is associated with the risk of developing cancer and is currently being studied for its effects on the human body. But that's not all. The refrigerator also affects the texture of potatoes, making them grainy, loose, and often dark, indicating oxidation and loss of nutrients. Instead of remaining a familiar and healthy product, chilled potatoes turn into a soft, sweet mass that, when cooked, can release harmful substances. If your fried potatoes have ever acquired a strange sweet taste or unusual consistency, storage in the refrigerator may have been to blame. It is recommended to store potatoes in a cool, dark, and dry place, rather than in the cold and humidity. This will help maintain their firmness, taste, and safety for consumption. Therefore, if you currently have a bag of potatoes in your refrigerator, it's worth removing them before they turn into a potential health threat lurking under the guise of an ordinary dinner. Bread, this humble but indispensable product, holds a special place on the table of many elderly people. It is widely believed that storing bread in the refrigerator prolongs its freshness. However, paradoxically, this is one of the most unfavorable ways to store it. The scientific explanation lies in a process known as retrogradation, which essentially means the crystallization of starch molecules in bread under the influence of low temperatures. This process begins almost immediately after placing the bread in the refrigerator, not after several weeks. What does this mean in practice? Bread placed in the refrigerator loses its taste qualities much faster than when stored at room temperature. Contrary to popular belief, the refrigerator does not preserve the freshness of bread. On the contrary, it accelerates the process of staling. The changes may not always be immediately noticeable, but they are certainly felt when consumed. The texture of the bread becomes hard, dry, and crumbly, which negatively affects the taste of toast and sandwiches. The situation is aggravated by the fact that when moisture is lost in the refrigerator, bread becomes an ideal environment for the growth of mold. Mold spores particularly love the humid and uneven environment that is created during the cooling and subsequent heating of bread. Moldy bread is not only unpleasant to taste, but also poses a serious health hazard. Some types of mold produce mycotoxins, toxic compounds that can cause serious health problems when ingested, especially in elderly people with weakened immune systems. As an alternative, freezing is a much more effective way to extend the shelf life of bread. Freezing stops mold growth and prevents staling without negatively affecting the bread's texture. It's recommended to slice the bread beforehand and defrost only the necessary amount of slices as needed. The refrigerator, however, should be excluded from the list of places to store bread. Store bread in a bread box or airtight container at room temperature for a few days, and for longer storage, use the freezer. Don't let the cold rob your bread of its life and put your health at risk. Onions might seem like a refrigerator staple, but this decision can have undesirable consequences. Nature has endowed this vegetable with a protective layer that shields it from moisture and preserves its flavor and consistency. Placing an onion in the refrigerator disrupts this delicate balance. The cold and humid environment inside the refrigerator encourages the active absorption of moisture, especially if the onion has already been cut. The result is a mushy texture, an unpleasant taste, and, in the worst case, the appearance of mold. But that's not all. Onions have a pronounced aroma due to sulfur compounds. In cold conditions, these compounds are released, penetrating other products stored nearby. Are you familiar with the feeling when butter or fruit acquires a strange onion smell? This isn't a figment of the imagination, but the result of the refrigerator acting as a sponge for volatile compounds. There's also a hidden threat of bacterial contamination. Cut onions, even in a closed container, become a favorable environment for the growth of bacteria. There's a widespread myth that onions can absorb toxins, but there's no scientific evidence to support this. But the fact remains, improperly stored onions, especially in conditions of high humidity, can become a source of harmful microorganisms. Whole onions are recommended to be stored in a dry, dark, and well-ventilated place, such as a pantry. Cut onions should be stored in the refrigerator in an airtight container and used within 1 to 2 days. Storing whole onions in the refrigerator is a direct path to spoilage, loss of nutrients, and the appearance of an unpleasant onion smell in the refrigerator. Tomatoes, seemingly simple and straightforward, are actually victims of a common misconception when it comes to proper storage. Many believe that the coolness of the refrigerator will prolong the life of these juicy fruits, but the truth is that low temperatures have a destructive effect on them, ruining their taste and texture. From a scientific point of view, the tomato is a native of the tropics, and cold is strictly contraindicated for it. Placing it in the refrigerator leads to a disruption of the natural enzymes responsible for ripening. And it's during the ripening process that the tomato acquires its unique taste. Deprived of this opportunity, it turns into a watery, tasteless, and mealy fruit, only remotely resembling the original. Don't forget about the texture. Tomatoes that have been in the cold lose their firmness and become soft, like rubber. The pleasant bite and juicy burst that we expect from a fresh tomato disappear. But that's not all. Cold also negatively affects the nutritional properties of tomatoes. They are a valuable source of vitamin C, which unfortunately is destroyed by low temperatures. Thus, by sending a tomato to the refrigerator, we sacrifice not only taste, but also health benefits. The appearance also suffers. The skin of a tomato exposed to cold wrinkles and loses its appeal, even if the fruit itself is still relatively fresh. If you've ever cut a tomato and found watery and tasteless flesh inside, you know that it was most likely refrigerated. So how do you properly store tomatoes? The ideal option is at room temperature, away from direct sunlight, stem down to preserve moisture. If the tomato is overripe, it's best to use it immediately for food or to make sauce. Don't send it to the refrigerator in the hope of prolonging its life. You'll only accelerate its demise. Garlic, this storehouse of beneficial properties, is often awarded the title of superfood due to its sulfur compounds, in particular allicin. These substances have a beneficial effect on the immune system and help lower blood pressure. However, non-compliance with storage rules can negate all these advantages and, in the worst case, harm health. Whole heads of garlic can maintain their qualities for several weeks or even months at room temperature, especially in a dry, cool, and well-ventilated place. Cooling disrupts the natural process of preservation, causing premature sprouting of the cloves. This not only worsens the taste of garlic, but also indicates the destruction of its chemical composition. Instead of the expected sharp and aromatic taste, bitterness and a rubbery texture appear. Furthermore, sprouted garlic loses a significant portion of allicin, the key compound responsible for its beneficial properties. But the most dangerous thing is that refrigerated garlic, especially chopped or minced and stored in oil, can become a breeding ground for Clostridium botulinum bacteria, which cause botulism. This is a rare but deadly disease that can lead to paralysis and even death if left untreated. The Food and Drug Administration, FDA, has repeatedly warned of the dangers of storing garlic in oil without adding acid or taking refrigeration precautions. However, many people ignore these recommendations, unaware of the potential risks. Instead of storing it in the refrigerator, it is recommended to place a whole head of garlic in a mesh bag or basket and store it in a pantry. If you use chopped garlic, try to use it as soon as possible and store it in a vinegar or lemon base to minimize the risk of bacterial contamination. Don't let the refrigerator deprive garlic of its beneficial properties or bring hidden dangers to your dishes. Contrary to popular belief, coffee holds an important place in the list of foods not intended for refrigeration, and there is a serious reason for this. Coffee beans, whether whole or ground, are highly susceptible to moisture, odors, and light. It is a common misconception that placing coffee in the refrigerator helps prolong its freshness, but in practice, this leads to accelerated spoilage of the product. Coffee exhibits hygroscopic properties, which means its ability to actively absorb moisture and odors from the environment, acting like a sponge. In the refrigerator, where coffee is adjacent to fruits, vegetables, and food scraps, it inevitably absorbs their aromas and tastes. This distorts the unique flavor bouquet of coffee beans, resulting in the drink. Acquiring an unpleasant, dull, bitter, or even strange taste. However, the problem is not only in changing the taste. Moisture poses a serious threat to coffee. Under the influence of cold air and humidity, characteristic of the refrigerator, condensation forms on the surface of the beans or ground coffee each time the door is opened and closed. This leads to clumping, premature drying, and the destruction of essential oils, which are responsible for the unique aroma and beneficial properties of coffee, in particular, the content of chlorogenic acids. Chlorogenic acids, which are powerful antioxidants, help maintain the health of the heart and brain. However, in cold and humid conditions, they are subject to accelerated destruction. Thus, refrigerated coffee not only loses its taste qualities, but also loses its potential health benefits. Moreover, mold can grow in moist ground coffee, especially if it is stored in a non-airtight package. Instead of storing it in the refrigerator, it is recommended to place the coffee in an opaque, airtight container and store it at room temperature in a dark place, such as a cabinet. This method of storage helps to preserve the freshness, aroma, and safety of coffee beans. It seems incredible, but this viscous golden elixir, which seems like an ideal candidate for cold storage, actually suffers from being in the refrigerator. Contrary to popular belief, refrigerating honey is not just a matter of changing its consistency. It is a direct path to destroying its unique preserving properties, thanks to which it remains an eternal product. When a jar of honey gets into the refrigerator, low temperatures provoke rapid crystallization. Honey becomes grainy, hard, and practically unusable. But the problem is not only in texture. Crystallization creates microscopic air pockets that let in moisture each time the jar is opened. And moisture, as you know, is the worst enemy of honey. Increased humidity can trigger a fermentation. Process which will reward the product with an unpleasant sour taste and smell. Worse, moisture opens the door for the development of microorganisms, with which honey usually successfully fights, thanks to its low water content and high acidity. However, under improper storage conditions, its natural protection weakens. Low temperatures also slow down the work of beneficial enzymes that are responsible for the antibacterial properties of honey. Thus, refrigeration not only changes the taste and texture, but also reduces its health benefits. The ideal place to store honey is a tightly closed jar, located in a pantry or kitchen cabinet, away from direct sunlight and sharp temperature changes. In such conditions, honey will retain its smooth texture, unique taste, and all the medicinal substances that have made it a time-tested remedy for maintaining health and beauty. Bananas, beloved by millions, hold a special place in the diets of older adults who appreciate their richness in potassium and ease of digestion. Paradoxically, however, placing bananas in the refrigerator can negate all of their valuable qualities. As natives of tropical climates, bananas possess an internal biochemistry perfectly adapted to warm conditions. Submerging them in the cold, especially before they are fully ripe, is akin to switching off the vital enzymes responsible for the ripening process. As a result, bananas may never reach their desired ripeness, remaining hard and tasteless. Moreover, their peel quickly acquires an unsightly grayish or black hue, indicative of cold damage. Beneath this darkened exterior, the banana often becomes mushy, with an unpleasant metallic taste. But it's not just about taste and appearance. Refrigeration also damages the natural antioxidants found in bananas, such as dopamine and catechins, which play an important role in maintaining brain health and reducing oxidative stress in aging cells. For older adults, these compounds are especially important, and putting bananas in the refrigerator deprives them of these valuable substances. In the event that a banana is already overripe, the accumulation of moisture inside the peel in refrigerated conditions can create a favorable environment for mold growth, especially around the stem. Thus, instead of prolonging shelf life, there is a risk of mold contamination. The optimal way to store bananas is at room temperature, preferably suspended or in a fruit bowl, ensuring air circulation. If there is an excess of ripe bananas, they can be peeled, frozen, and used later for smoothies or baking. But you should avoid storing bananas in the refrigerator in the hope of prolonging their freshness. Ultimately, this will lead to a loss of nutrients, texture, and taste of this valuable fruit. Among the products used for cooling, olive oil poses the greatest danger, especially for older adults. This product, thanks to its beneficial properties for the heart and widespread use in cooking, is a staple in many diets. When refrigerated, olive oil undergoes a solidification process. Fatty acids crystallize, which leads to clouding and partial solidification of the oil. This physical change is not harmful in itself, but the repeated temperature fluctuations that occur when the oil is removed from the refrigerator and returned back create serious health. Risks that older adults are often unaware of. Each time olive oil goes from a cold environment to a warm one, its chemical structure undergoes deformation, which accelerates oxidation. This can lead to the formation of harmful free radicals and a reduction in the beneficial antioxidant properties of the oil. Such oxidative changes can turn a heart-healthy product into a source of compounds that can contribute to inflammatory processes in the body, which is completely undesirable for older adults. Of particular concern are scientific studies showing that vegetable oils exposed to high temperatures can exacerbate inflammatory processes in the joints and cause digestive disorders, which is quite common among older people. The solidification of the oil also creates difficulties when pouring it, increasing the likelihood of spillage or excessive use, which leads to an unnecessary increase in the caloric content of the diet of older adults. In addition to the negative impact on health, the taste characteristics are significantly worsened. Chilled olive oil loses its characteristic fruity and peppery notes, which make it a valuable component of the Mediterranean diet, recommended for maintaining heart health. Instead, it is recommended to store olive oil in a dark glass or metal container in a cool cupboard, away from heat sources such as the stove. When stored properly, high-quality olive oil retains its beneficial properties and taste qualities for up to 2 years. Above were listed 9 products that are not recommended to be stored in the refrigerator. It is recommended to start by reorganizing the kitchen space depending on the type of products. Tropical fruits such as bananas and avocados should be kept out of the refrigerator until fully ripe. Potatoes and onions are best stored in cool, dark places, not in cold and humid conditions. Bread is recommended to be stored at room temperature or in the freezer, but not in the refrigerator. Honey should find a place in the pantry, and coffee in an airtight container in a dark cupboard. Garlic and tomatoes should be treated as the powerful natural ingredients that they are, and stored wisely to preserve their taste and health benefits.